right, everyone, this is Vishal from EQUITY.GURU, and I'm going to try something a bit different now. A new sort of series where I'm going to approach investments, as someone that's in his 30s, maybe you're younger than me as well, and you're looking for future investments. And I'm going to try to attempt to answer questions on things that I'm looking for, why I'm investing in certain commodities or assets now, and what I can see for the future, or why I'm bullish said commodity or said asset for the future. So in today's video, we're going to talk about why copper and why now. And some of you guys, if you come from a technical standpoint, a lot of people talk about copper as Dr. Copper because it is sort of seen as that industrial metal, right? When you're building something, you have to use copper. It's in your plumbing, it's in buildings, it's in homes. So if someone's building a lot of infrastructure, if a country, is building a lot of infrastructure, copper is going to be that big metal of choice. And of course, recently, or I'd say in the past decade, China's been that big story, right? China's been that growing economy, 6% GDP growth for some time until post the pandemic, obviously. And a lot of that copper was being imported to China because they were building a lot of buildings. And that was, sort of the start, or China's was that start of that commodity cycle boom, especially in copper. But let's talk about what comes next. I'm still very bullish actually on copper, to be honest. And again, it is a base metal. A lot of you guys maybe that follow my work know that I'm a big fan of monetary metals as well, especially gold and silver, but we'll do videos on that down the road. Copper here, I have a few PowerPoint slides here that I want to share with you guys. So this one is about copper consumption. You can see consumption is increasing as the world heads towards a greener economy. And we're going to talk about that in just a bit because copper has quickly become the green energy or the clean energy metal, or simply the green metal. That's what a lot of people are calling for. So if you're worried about, climate crisis, global warming, and this move to a cleaner green infrastructure economy, copper is one of the metals, or probably the primary metal for you. And that's where this next big demand is going to come from. So let's take a look again at the slide. Let's get back to the slide. But for over 5 decades, mine production has been constantly outnumbered by human consumption. You can see the demand for copper is obviously increasing, whereas the supply of copper is doing the opposite. And not only that, but it's the discovery of new economic copper deposits. And this is also something we talk about when we look at gold and silver as well. And hence why a lot of us are excited about the juniors, because essentially a lot of these companies, mining companies, just like the oil companies, they expanded very quickly and took on a lot of debt when a lot of these metals were, spiking in the early 2010s there. And then obviously the prices fell, and these miners were left holding that bag with a lot of debt, and some bad projects, I guess, or projects that weren't economically feasible. Very similar again to the oil story. And because of that, a lot of exploration budgets have declined, but that's where, these juniors are sort of stepping in, saying, hey, if the majors, these major mining companies, if they're not exploring and expanding their resource, we'll do that for them. And then hopefully they'll like what we have because they haven't been spending that money on exploration. We've done that job for them. And that's where, you'll see a takeover or maybe a joint venture or something. And I'm just explaining sort of the basics of mining and investing in some of these junior miners, but that's sort of the story that you're looking for. And hence why, in previous videos, we always talk about closeology, right? If there's a junior miner that has a project that's close to, a major producing mine, maybe there's a better chance that that vein continues onto that junior's land package, and hopefully they can find a resource, build that resource, get it all de-risked, shovel ready, and that major will step in and jump in. So what I'm just trying to say here is that, as you can see here, 224 copper deposits have been identified in the span of 2 decades 10.4 discoveries per year, and only 16 deposits were discovered in the last 10 years, or an average of 1.6 discoveries per year. So once again, increase of demand, the need for copper expected to rise in coming years. That is a key factor in the world's initiative to slash carbon emissions by transitioning to a clean energy technology, while the supply is slowly decreasing. And we won't get too complicated on the geology here, but there's also copper grade, right? A lot of people talk about clean concentrate copper because that's a bit more economically feasible to work with. And you're seeing here, because a lot of these mines, these large mines, have been in production for decades, many years. Some of the best copper ore grades are now getting depleted, and they're now bringing out average copper grades, which continue to decrease as well. So high copper grades, clean concentrate coppers, that's something that we want to look for. Some of you may have come across this gentleman's name. His name is Gianni Kovacevic. He is someone who has appeared on many investing programs, CNBC and such, and he's written this book called My Electrician Drives a Porsche, Investing in the Rise of the New Spending Class. And he's known for talking about copper being the next oil. You can sort of see here, copper is headed for its biggest bull. I can guess it's probably going to say run, and demand for this metal, which I'm sure is copper, is about to grow by 1,000%, because he is known as that copper guy, and talking about the electrification of the economy. And what does that necessarily mean? It means, for homeowners, it means clean energy and environmental advocacy organizations believing that it's the fastest and best way to drive down carbon emissions. And all about electrifying the economy, more copper, and exactly what we talked about here on this slide, where copper is going to be the metal to slash carbon emissions by transitioning to clean energy technologies. And that's the whole crux of this idea of the electrification of the economy. And I highly recommend you listen to some of Gianni Kovacevic's videos or read his work. And he's made this case of copper being the next oil in the next green, clean economy. So really fun stuff there. And we talked about building things, right? When you're building things, infrastructure projects, copper is essential for everything. Everyone's heard about the President Biden, the $1 trillion clean energy bill. I believe it's passed. Last year, I believe it passed. So it's been a while, but this is sort of seen as the next major infrastructure spending plan, right? If you look at the economy, if the economy is slowing down because the Fed is raising too much interest rates and governments want to speed up the economy, usually the way they do it is by spending a lot of money on creating infrastructure projects which create jobs, and perhaps the next major infrastructure project that's being lined up is going to be for clean energy, for this green and clean infrastructure, which can be the next sort of infrastructure deal that's going to lead to, I guess you could say, a new, I don't want to say a new economy per se, but like a bump in the economy, right? Like the governments are going to use it as a way to try to get people back working, create jobs, try to, get us out of a recession. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Trying to get the economy back alive. And, we've seen that in the past, right? With Roosevelt and other previous presidents, large infrastructure bills after a large decline to try to get jobs created. And green infrastructure, folks, maybe this is the next big thing. I think it probably is going to be the next big thing, which means copper is going to be in high demand. Keep in mind that supply and demand stuff that we've talked about. Two of the largest copper mines in the world, Escondida, owned by BHP, this is in Chile, and of course the Grasberg mine that is owned by Freeport in Indonesia. So these mines are pretty much legendary. They're the largest copper mines. I believe, Grasberg is the largest. But in the past, you have heard about certain things happening in these mines, right? We've heard that there was this worker strike. A lot of the miners strike because they wanted more money, which caused the mines to shut down for some time. And then there's always talk about, the government getting involved. Indonesia sort of has a history of that, if you guys remember BRIEX, right? But a lot of people talk about, hey, what if the Indonesian government just, randomly says, hey, let's step in and do something and take a bit more money, right? Because these guys are making a large amount of money because copper prices are rising, and they're in Indonesia, so we want a bigger chunk of the revenue that's coming out from the mine. So these type of geopolitical news headlines can definitely impact the price of copper, and we've seen that in the past when we've seen news impacting the Grasberg mine in Indonesia and also the Escondida mine in Chile. So keep that on your radar as well. I hinted to this earlier, but China is still, that large importer of copper, and you can see China got out of lockdown on June 2nd, and the price of copper has risen, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. But I've already given this case of this new infrastructure projects being built by the US, right? But a lot of people say, hey, China is that big demand for copper. If that demand from China dies down, it's not just going to hit copper, but it's going to hit a lot of commodities, because China was sort of the key figure of that super cycle that we've seen, or that commodity boom that we saw beginning in 2010. How about India? How about India, folks? Maybe India is going to take the mantle over from China and be the next fastest growing economy, maybe even eclipsing 6% GDP per quarter. And if India is building infrastructure, they're going to need a lot of copper. And folks, I'm Indian. I haven't been to India for quite a long time, but I think there's a lot of development that is left to do in India, right? A lot of people still talk about the rural villages. There's still a lot of people, that don't have, say, flushing toilets or power at places. So, I'm excited if India is going to start building major infrastructure like this, because I really do believe that it can be that fastest growing economy. So a lot of eyes then will talk about India and their copper demand, which I think will be enough to keep the demand for copper high, even though China might be beginning to slow down a bit. So I hope I've given you guys a picture of a lot of reasons on why copper, why now. And if you're a young investor or are looking for a long-term investment, I think investing in copper is a very smart thing to do. You guys know I'm a technical guy, so just very quickly on the copper chart here per pound, copper did hit $5 per pound, which was the highest on record. And we saw this, with the whole boom in commodities when we saw supply chains get disrupted, with the whole Russia-Ukraine situation, but also other supply chain issues that are, affecting everything, I would say, right? Not just commodities and copper in general. Major weeklies ago here at $4 per pound that I was watching. And then if we come down to the daily chart here on copper, you can see copper had a very big 5% move on June 2nd. And it happened to be when China came out of lockdown. It's 2-month lockdown. So I think that China demand, or China coming back into the commodity markets, right, to try to spur growth once again, is going to be beneficial, not just to copper here for the medium term or maybe for the long term, but also for plenty of other commodities here. So that's, I think, like a short term to medium term type story that can keep the copper prices here elevated. And I hope, as I said, I've given you a good case on why copper is going to be a good investment for the long term. And I think, we probably will be passing that $5 per pound mark on copper if you look at that supply and demand mechanics, which we talked about earlier. And I'm going to leave you off with this one chart here. Freeport-McMoRan. Again, these guys, if you guys recall, little quiz, folks. What mine do they own? Yes, it is, of course, that mine in Indonesia, the Grasberg mine. So you can invest in copper by, playing a company or investing in a company that mines copper. They pay a dividend here as well. And it looks very similar to the chart of copper, which I just showed you earlier. So it tends to have a good correlation with copper prices. And this is a stock that, folks, was trading around $4 in March of 2020. and has just had an epic rally up to $50 per share in like less than 2 years, right? So that's just a taste of what can happen. And if copper is going to be that next big metal because of the move to the electrification of the economy, I think a company like Freeport-McMoRan will be bringing in the big bucks. So once again, folks, a bit different, a bit of a longer video here, but I hope I've helped you in deciding on whether to invest in copper or not. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the description box or in the comments below, sorry. And I'll be sure to read your comments and answer questions if need be. Let me know what you guys think about copper. Are you guys bullish copper, or do you think that there is a reason not to be bullish on copper in the long term? Let me know, and I'll see you guys all in the next technical and fundamental video.